South Africa has declared a state of national disaster, the second one in 2 years. The first was because of the pandemic, and now it's because the country has plunged into darkness. South Africa is facing the worst energy crisis in decades. President Cyril Ramaphosa says he'll appoint an electricity minister soon. But this crisis has to do with more than power. It's a story of how rampant corruption and looting can cripple a country. Here's a report. This is what South Africa looks like now. It has plunged into an unprecedented energy crisis. Millions of homes are without electricity. Businesses are struggling to stay afloat. Power cuts have become a daily affair, lasting for more than 10 hours. And there seems to be no respite in sight. All eyes were on the South African Parliament on Friday. It saw dramatic scenes of opposition parties protesting, barging onto the stage before being driven out. Then President Cyril Ramaphosa delivered his State of the Nation address. And the state wasn't the best.
The National Disaster Management Center has consequently classified the energy crisis and its impact as a disaster. We are therefore declaring a national state of disaster to respond to the electricity crisis and its effects.
The state of the disaster is the latest measure by the government to control the electricity crisis. And this isn't the first time. It was first used during the COVID lockdown in 2020. Then during the deadly floods last year that saw more than 40,000 people being displaced. The government says the emergency provision will help them buy time.
It will enable us to provide practical measures that we need to take to support businesses, a number of businesses, for instance, in food production, storage, retail supply chains, including for the rollout of generators and solar panels, and uninterrupted power supply.
Africa's most industrialized nation is paying a heavy price for this. Its economic growth is expected to fall to just 0.3% this year, compared to 2.5% last year. Almost half of South Africa is unemployed. It is battling an external debt of $130 billion. A power crisis is the last thing that South Africa needs. And it's been brewing for a while. Power cuts have been a daily affair in South Africa since 2007. When President Ramaphosa came to power in 2018, he promised to fix it. But his plans remain stuck in red tape. At the center of the storm is Eskom, a 100-year-old company and South Africa's struggling state power supplier. Eskom supplies around 80% of the nation's power. The company is riddled with corruption, decades of mismanagement, high debt, and aging infrastructure. It has changed 13 CEOs in 14 years. Its power stations are aging, their output as unreliable as the company's reputation. A judicial probe from last year revealed that Eskom had entered into irregular contracts for coal supply. The contracts were worth more than $800 million. They were given to entities close to former President Jacob Zuma. And this is reported to be just the tip of the iceberg. Reports suggest Eskom's coal supplies have been misused for far too long. So here's where the nation is at, a corrupt institution that is struggling to maintain basic infrastructure. It has grand plans to retire some of its older fleet in the next 7 years, but does it have alternatives in place? Not quite. In 2022, South Africa saw a record 205 days of rolling blackouts. The situation has not improved in 2023, and South Africans aren't too pleased. Citizens took to the streets last month. The opposition took on the government.
We want the ongoing blackouts to come to a complete end. We are not fighting or blaming anyone. We just want these blackouts to come to an end. In the townships we live in, criminals commit crimes during blackouts.
We really need government to come to a point where they sit down and discuss and use the relevant people to make the change within the issues that we are facing. Because in all honesty, it affects us so much financially, physically and emotionally.
President Cyril Ramaphosa says he will appoint a new electricity minister to tackle the crisis. The government says the situation will be resolved in 6 to 12 months, but Eskom says the power cuts could continue well into 2025. The people of South Africa can only hope to find light at the end of this dark tunnel.